right, I think we'll go ahead and get started today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Training Thursdays with the Stoplight Customer Success team. My name is Amy, and I am joined today by my colleague Cheryl, and together we will be the host for your training session today. As we get started, we will go ahead and turn off our cameras so we can focus on the presentation. Perfect. Just a few notes about the logistics of our webinar today. First, you will have, or if you have any questions during the presentation today, feel free to post those in the Q&A window. We have people monitoring that window and they will respond to the questions that are asked. And then at the conclusion of our webinar today, we will post all of the questions and their answers in the Stoplight community in Discord. And for those of you who haven't been there, I will pop a little link to that really quick. And then second, during Cheryl's tour of the studio interface, I will be posting some product documentation links in the chat window. So if you would like additional information about the specific product function that's being referenced, I invite you to click on and bookmark the link so you can reference it later. The documentation will help you better understand the feature and how to implement it as you build out your workspace. And then finally, for those of you watching the recorded version of this training session, you'll find the posted links in the video description below. And if you have any questions while you're viewing the recording, you can join us in the Stoplight community in Discord and use the training tag to post your questions. The purpose of today's training is to review some key Stoplight concepts and walk through an overview of the Stoplight Studio interface. I'll be starting our session today with a quick overview of how the Stoplight platform can assist you and your organization with your API development needs. And from there, we'll review a few key concepts that will help us navigate the platform. Then Cheryl will introduce us to the Stoplight Studio user interface and review the features and settings within Studio. So let's take a quick look at the key features of Stoplight that can help you and your organization enhance your API development processes. Stoplight's API design features allow you to develop quality APIs with a collaborative approach to an API design-first philosophy. It helps create and prototype your APIs using our intuitive visual editor for open API specifications, and you can create your APIs in line with industry best practices. Also, with the release of discussions, members can add comments, ask questions, and interact within the Studio interface. Discussions also integrates with popular task tools like Jira and Slack to help facilitate collaboration outside of your workspace as well. With Stoplight's API mocking features, you can instantly create a mock version of your API based on your open API specification. This allows you to visualize and get feedback on your API designs before spending time on back-end services development. API mocking also allows your front-end client application developers and back-end services development teams to develop their projects in parallel. With Stoplight's API documentation features, you can provide a top-notch developer experience for internal and external consumers through automatically generated documentation based on your open API files. This will help internal and external users discover, learn, and integrate with your APIs quickly by publishing interactive API documentation, tutorials, and code samples that are always up to date. And finally, Stoplight's governance features allow you to govern your APIs at scale with an always in sync central repository of API designs, schemas, and API documentation. You can easily share, apply, and enforce standards across all of your API designs to provide consistency, reusability, and better governance throughout your API program. You can utilize Stoplight's public style guides to leverage sets of curated API design rules from top companies around security and design themes. And using the proposals feature, you can see recent API design changes at a glance and keep track of changes across your Git connected projects. So now that we've reviewed how Stoplight can enhance your API development processes, let's take a minute to review some key concepts to understand within Stoplight. namely the Stoplight hierarchy and the two main user interfaces that you will encounter. Within Stoplight, you have your workspace and studio interfaces. Your hierarchy begins with your workspace. Within your workspace, you'll establish your look and feel, as well as setting up your integrations with your Git repos and SSO options. You'll also create and manage your members and projects within your workspace interface. To help you better manage your members, you can create teams. Teams are simply members grouped together for easier management. And to provide order to your projects, you can create groups. Groups are a collective of projects stored together in a folder, again, for ease of management. This allows you to organize and grant access to appropriate projects when new members join your workspace. Then within the studio user interface, your members will edit different projects and the artifacts associated with each project. As a member begins to navigate through the different groups and into individual projects, they will see the docs view for each project. In the docs view, a member can learn more about each project, and based on the member's granted rights within that project, they may move into editing the selected project. This will transition them from the workspace to the studio interface. Within the scope of a single project in Studio, you may have one or many API designs and open API specifications, endpoints, models and schemas, documentation articles, and applied style guides. And within a style guide project, you have the ability to create and manage rules and functions for your own style guide. When you transition between your individual Stoplight projects, you will navigate from Studio back up to the workspace where you can select a new project and then head back into Studio to edit the specific artifacts associated with that project. Your technical team and API design architects will likely be spending the majority of their time within the Studio user interface. So today we'll be focusing on that studio interface and how your API developers and tech writers will be utilizing the tool to create and edit their different project artifacts. So now that we understand how Stoplight can help with our API design and how to navigate through it, I will hand you over to Cheryl, who will walk us through a tour of the studio interface and show us how your API developers and tech writers will interact within Studio. Cheryl, I'll give it to you.
Thanks, Amy. All right, so we're going to go over to our workspace. So my workspace may be a little bit different than what your view is, depending upon your subscription as well as your role. So there may be some feature functionality that is not available to you based off of your subscription and or role. So currently we are in the Stoplight hosted project or a web project. I do not have a Git repository connected to this workspace currently. So we're going to keep everything focused on the Stoplight hosted project rather than the Git project. I will point out a few things that are available to you that are specific for the Git repository as we go along and kind of share with you a little bit about those differences or what those things do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Studio and we're going to take a tour. I'm going to show you a little bit about what the buttons do and what they mean. And then we'll come back and we'll create a brand new project from there. So we're going to go ahead and find a project to access. And we're going to go to our projects tab. I have a project that is in my Training Thursday project. And so my Stoplight Studio 101 project is an existing project. And depending upon your role, you might have an edit button here. You can click on that edit button and go right into it. If not, you can click deeper into that particular project and there will be an edit button that will appear for you if you do have the accessibility. So when you come into your studio, your screens are going to kind of look a little bit like this. We're going to go over the project toolbar first. We'll talk a little bit about the editor, which is the center area here. And then we will talk about the project sidebar here on the left-hand side. And so we're going to start here at the top left. You have a Go to Docs button. That Go to Docs button takes you back to your workspace in the documentation view. Right next to that, you have the hamburger button or the hamburger menu. So when you click on the hamburger menu, you also have a Go to Docs button. You have a preferences button. Now this preferences button gives you the ability to kind of change your views from light to dark. This is user specific, so it does not affect your workspace members, team members who are in the workspace as well. The download a project zip. This is a best practice recommendation that after you have completed your project, we recommend that you go ahead and download a copy of your project so that if something gets corrupted and or changed beyond recognition, you have the ability to restore your project. Then you also have the ability to export a spectral file from here. Right next to that button is the keyword search button. This is a keyword search for artifacts within the project. So if you type a keyword search, you'll notice that we have a few items that have this particular keyword in it, and it will pull up those lists of artifacts. Right next to that is the plus button. The plus button has quite a few features and functionality here. You have the ability to create a new API endpoint or model. You can create a new article. And then this Stoplight config button. This config button is specific to having a Git repository. It allows you to place some parameters around including or excluding specific files that are pulled into your Stoplight project from your repo. So we recommend that you check out the documentation on that so that you can understand how to leverage that particular button. You can import an image as well as create a table of contents. Now, the table of contents has quite a bit of functionality as well. You can customize an order of files in the sidebar. You can overwrite a title in a file. You can customize published URLs from articles or API artifacts. You can add or remove files from the sidebar. That allows you to actually hide them in the table of contents. You can set an API or an article to have internal visibility in the table of contents so that it's not exposed to public projects or to possibly non-members. And then you also have the ability to set the default state for groups to be expanded and collapsed. So again, there will be a link for documentation. You can check out that. So you also have the ability to create a file or create a directory. You can import a style guide, import a file, or import a directory from here as well. So we'll come back and explore this plus button a little bit in the future. Right next to that is the publish or commit button. So it will say publish if you are in a Stoplight hosted project, and it'll be commit if you're in a Git repository, if you have a Git repository connected to it. That just gives you the ability to save the changes that you've made to your project, and then it will publish it into your workspace. Then there's a little drop down button, and it's the discard changes since the last published. This particular button is a rather handy button. If you go in and you are making lots of changes and you change your mind, you can use this button to go back to the last previous saved version of either publish or commit. So if you are working in a file, even let's say if you're in a Windows file and you open up your window, you make some changes and you decide not to save it, you close out of that window, you can go back to your file that you saved recently and pull that file back up. That's kind of what that button does in a nutshell. All right, over here to the center, you're going to have your project name listed for you, so you always know where you're at. And then right next to that is your branching or version button. So this branching or version gives you the ability, and it's versions in Stoplight hosted project, and it's branches in the Git repository if you aren't already familiar with that. And you can take a look at the documentation. We recommend that you check out the documentation as you develop your branching or versioning strategies. Over to the right-hand side, you'll notice that there is a comments button that is grayed out. We will show you a little bit more about that coming up, but that is the new discussions feature that allows you to collaborate with your workspace members and your API design documents. Now, you do have the ability to work with other colleagues through integrating the discussions feature or this comments tab with like Slack or Jira, some other applications that are available to be able to communicate and connect with users who may not necessarily have access to your workspace. So you can collaborate with them outside of the workspace as well. And we'll go over that a little bit here in the near future. Then you have the share button. The share button gives you quite a bit of functionality as well. So you can change your project visibility. So if you wanted to change this from an internal project to a public project, you can. You can add teams, and then you have the ability to change the roles or edit the roles. And you can also individually invite members and set their roles as well. All right. So we're going to take a look at this the editor panel, which is the center area. There are a lot of, when you do not have an artifact active, your screen will show this particular editor. And they give you some shortcut buttons that you can create some of these artifacts. You also have the ability to import some specific files here. And then this recent section are just hyperlinks or shortcuts as you pop in and out of different artifacts within your project. These hyperlinks will take you there as well. So that's one way to get there. Then we have the help documentation at the bottom, which gives you access to the link to the studio documentation. You can go to the Workspace Quick Start Guide. You can report a bug, and you can also request a feature. All right. So we're going to come over here to this project side panel, and you'll have some tabs here, and we're going to go through each of these tabs. And this is your API button or your project button where you're going to create a lot of your APIs and or import files. You'll notice here at the top of the screen, you'll see like some models or schemas. If you see models or schemas appear at the top of your screen, when we select the file or the API, your screen splits in half. The top half is the reusability of models or schemas, or anything that appears in the top half is reusable within other APIs or projects. At the bottom, you'll see it's the API overview. We have a model here that is specifically used in this API. And at the bottom half of the screen is our reusability within the API itself. So, and it also gives you like quick ability to be able to move to different sections within your API if you've got quite extensive coding there in your API. All right, so we're going to go ahead, and you'll notice when you click on your particular screen that the editor panel has changed, and across the top you'll notice that these tabs start appearing. So these tabs are like the shortcut in the editor panel. They just give you the ability to pop back and forth between different artifacts within this project. And then you'll notice that your screen changed here in the center, and you have your form view and your code view. So you have a toggle button, whichever you prefer to work in, you can toggle to the form view or the code view. I'll bring your attention to this nice little button here. It's very handy. It is the internal button. So if you are working on a project that will be a public project, and temporarily you need to save it as an internal project because you are not done with it and you are not ready for it to be exposed to the public, you can toggle that button on, and it will save your project temporarily as an internal file, not exposing it yet until you are ready. You'll notice that the comments button here at the top became live, and you'll have a comments panel that appears when you do click on it. Sometimes it's defaulted and it'll pull up there automatically. And you have the ability to connect to different integration applications to be able to collaborate with other colleagues. So if you want to do that, you can click on this little inbox button. And when you click on this inbox button, it'll pull up some other things for you, but you can see the settings gear. If you click on the settings gear and scroll down, you'll see the applications that this particular functionality integrates with, and you are welcome to connect those. You'll notice that we have our Slack connected to our discussions feature right now, so we can collaborate with others who are maybe not necessarily in our specific workspace. So we're going to go ahead and close out that, and we're going to take a look at these other buttons up here at the top. You have also the ability to click on a preview button. This is an auto-generated document that Stoplight is smart enough to create for you. So you can check that out to see if that's what you're expecting to see with your API. And then over to the right-hand side of that, there is a warnings or an errors tab that will show you if you have a style guide associated to your workspace or your project, you may have errors that show up if you are just creating some new things. That's a form of governance that is available within the Stoplight Studio as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to our components libraries. So our components library, it allows for you to create shared libraries for reuse within multiple APIs, helping you save time and reduce errors, as well as improving collaboration on those. Right now, the components library are for models and schemas currently. They will be adding additional functionality here in the near future, so stay tuned. And in this particular components library, you'll notice that we have a model that is created in this particular project or in this particular API that is reusable throughout the other API projects. So when you click on your model, you'll see your screen looks very similar to what your API screen does. You have the form view with that internal toggle button. You can click the code if you prefer to work in the code view, and then you can also preview that particular model. And then just so you know, there's a nice handy little button here. If you wanted to have people copy that, you can click on that and that will copy that particular information. All right. So one of the other things that if you have a component, like a components library created, you can click into your model and you can include or locate any of those models from the library. If you have a library, it will show up here. You can search here if it's not showing up to locate that particular library and then reuse those components. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and go to the Documentations tab. In your Documentations tab, you will have an article, or if you create an article, the articles leverage a Stoplight flavored markdown, and your screen changes differently in this particular tab as well. You'll notice that you'll have some markdown toolbar here across the top, along with that internal toggle button. And Stoplight, if you create an article, Stoplight gives you some baseline markdown to start working from. You also have the preview button over to the right-hand side, and you can see if this is what you're expecting. And then if you do have a style guide that is associated to your documentation, you may or may not have issues that if that style guide gets applied to your documentation creation. All right, now our Files tab. So our files tab shows you a list of all of the artifacts that are created, imported, or associated to your particular project. And so you'll see documentation models, you'll see all of the APIs that either files that have been imported and or APIs that have created. And then this is the area where you would create a table of contents as well. So, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the actual demo, but Stoplight does create a baseline code for you, and then you can preview it over to the right-hand side. All right. And so now we're going to go down into the style guides, which is the governance feature within our Stoplight Studio. And if you have style guides that are applied to your workspace and or project, they will appear right here. Over to the left-hand side, you'll notice that those style guides are kind of show up in your side panel. You have the ability, if you're interested in taking a look a little bit closer at what those rules are, you can click on those and it will show you a list of the rules. Over to the right-hand side, you can get a lot more detail about those particular rules. And you also have the ability to validate in that tab as well. And if you are trying to get out of here, you can then click back on the overview button. That will take you back to your main screen so that you can get back to it. You also have your Manage Style Guides button here to the right-hand side. You may, depending upon what your role is, or whether your administrators allow you to have access to the Manage Style Guides button, you have the ability to enable or disable some of those style guides. When you click on that particular button, it takes you to a workspace. It'll show you workspace style guides that have been created specifically in your workspace. And then right below that are all of the public offered style guides. Now, if you have style guides that are applied, you will see they will be highlighted and there will be a check mark in the top right-hand box. You do have the ability to preview. You can click on a preview. If you click on the preview, it opens up a tab and it'll show you all of the details of that particular style guide. You also have then the ability to enable or disable those if your administration allows you to. All right, so we're going to go ahead and cancel out of that. And we're going to go back and we're going to go back to our workspace and we're going to create a brand new project. So we're going to go to the plus button and we're going to click on that plus button. That brings you to the create a project screen. You'll notice here across the top, there are several options. You can create an API. You can create a style guide. So if you're on the governance team, you can create that style guide from here. And something that is brand new is the components library. So you can click on that and create a components library from here. It will take you then, once it creates, it'll take you into that components library tab. And you can create all of the components that you want. Right now, again, models and schemas, there will be other features and functionality coming in the future. Over to the left-hand side, if you have a Git repository, you can go ahead and connect a Git repository. But today, I am not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and name our project. We're going to call it our pet project today. And we're going to change the visibility to a public project. Now, I do want to save this in my Trainings Thursday group, so I'm going to save it there. And we're going to go ahead and create an API project. All right. So currently, what we're going to do is we're going to start at the bottom of these tabs and work our way up so that we can build the foundation for this particular project. So we're going to go back into that governance tab. And I'll show you a little bit more on the style guide. So I'm going to go into the style guides, and there's this documentation style guide that is a public style guide. And I'm going to go ahead and enable that. And if I hit save, you'll notice that that style guide appears kind of in that long list of other style guides that have been applied. Just as a demo, I showed that to you. I'm going to go ahead and disable it at this point in time because I do not know what kind of errors it's going to throw me. So you do have more time. You can go in and investigate more about those rules. The Files tab is right now blank because we don't have anything created, but I will come back to the Files tab at the end after I've built and imported some things, so you can kind of see what your Files tab will look like after building a few things. We're going to go into our Documentations tab. So the documentations, you have the ability to create an article. You can create it from this center button here in the editor panel. It gives you a default button here, and you also can use the plus button to create an article here. So we're going to go ahead and click on this side panel button, and we're going to go ahead and create, we're going to name our documentation. We're just going to call it our pet project. We're going to leverage some tags. So we're going to create a training tag. And that is a best practice recommendation, is to leverage those tags. And then you can go ahead and create your document. Now, Stoplight is smart enough, like I mentioned earlier, to give you some baseline markdown. And it's a Stoplight flavored markdown, so you can leverage that markdown. You can click on preview as well to see a little bit about what that is. Now, rather than put you through the excruciating pain of watching me try to create markdown, I have something that is already created. I'm going to go ahead and see if we can get it pasted here. So I have pasted some markdown in here. And then when you click on the preview button, you'll have the ability to preview the documentation. And you can see if this is what you're expecting as you build your markdown. And if it is, then it looks like we're looking good. And I have no issues applied to my documentation at this point in time. So we are good to go. So I am going to go on to the components library. The components library, again, as a reminder, it gives you the ability to collaborate with shared models and things that are pre-created. So we're going to go to our components library. You have the ability here, you can click on the model button here to create a model. It gives you another shortcut button here, and you can create a model from the plus button. So we'll create a model from that plus button. And we're going to call this our pet project model 1. And I'm going to tag again. We're going to create a training tag. Now you'll notice to the bottom of this button, there's a couple different buttons here. Common means that it will be leveraged, or it will be a model or a schema that is leveraged throughout the project itself. So multiple APIs can leverage that particular model. If you click on your single API, you will see the screen changes a little bit, and then it'll give you the ability to choose a specific API. Now, because I do not have any APIs created at this point in time, I don't have any API options. But for right now, I know that I'm going to create a common one. So we're going to go ahead and create that. And you'll notice that your screen changes a little bit. And Stoplight is smart enough to give you some baseline code, and it shows up in the form view. You'll see your preview, but you'll also happen to notice that the comments button is live as well. So this gives you the ability to collaborate in the form view of your models or your component libraries. If you'll notice, if you click on the code view, as of right now, the comments feature goes away, but you will in the future have the code capability. So stay tuned on that as well. That will be a future feature release. All right, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to create one more model. We're going to call this one, we're going to be really original, folks, and we're going to call this one our pet project model number 2. And we're going to leverage the training tag on this one as well. We're going to leave this one as a common as well, and I'm going to go ahead and create it. So your models will appear here. And so when you are done creating any models, you can go to your APIs tab. You'll notice your models appear at the top of this sidebar in your APIs. If I had some specific APIs that were created, or models, sorry, that were created for APIs only, they would appear at the bottom of the screen, kind of like what I shared with you previously. So in the APIs tab, we are going to go ahead and build a few APIs. So you can create an API from here. You can right click in the sidebar and it'll give you the ability to create a new API from here, and you can do it from the plus button. So we're going to go ahead and create a new API. And you'll see it here in your buttons, the versioning. So this is the open API spec versioning that you want to be able to support in this particular API, and then the format. So you can change which format version you want. Now, you also have the ability to import some existing files associated with this particular API name. If you want to do that, you would do that right here. We're going to go ahead and hit the create button, and you'll notice Stoplight gives you some baseline code. It's smart enough to know what code is needed for an API. So you can, from here, use that as a shortcut and edit what you need accordingly. And then you'll notice that the preview button will have that Stoplight automatic generated documentation for you, as well as there may or may not be some errors that are created based off of the style guides that are applied to your workspace. So we're going to go ahead and go in. I have a couple different files that I'm going to go ahead and import. I have an open API spec. Now here, Stoplight supports several different open API or file types. So we recommend going ahead and checking out the documentation for that. And you can go ahead and click on, I'm going to click on the open API button. I have an API document, open API spec document that I am going to import. And you'll see that that file appears over here to the left-hand side. I also have a Postman collection, so I'm going to right click and we're going to go to import, and I'm going to import a Postman collection from here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that one in, and let's take a look at these files that I've imported here. So this Postman, you'll see some of the Stoplight auto-generated documentation that it's creating. Over to the right-hand side, it looks like I have quite a few errors. So on this particular document, it's going to take me a little bit of time to go through those errors and correct everything. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as an internal API for the time being until I get done fixing all of those. And then I can, when I'm ready to publish, I can publish it back to a public project. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the open API spec file that I have uploaded, and you'll notice here in the form view and that my comments button is available. So we're going to take a look at probably your errors. Oh, I have a couple errors. So when you have your style guides applied, you may or may not have some errors that show, but if you do, you have the ability to click on that particular error and it will take you to that section in the code view. And it looks like that it is a matter of a typo. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that typo. And you'll notice over to the right-hand side that that error disappears. So it's given me a warning also, letting me know that there is a contact object. Now, this particular object, I'm going to go to the form view and show you a little bit about leveraging the form view, but it's referring to the contact object here in the form view. And I'm going to go ahead and fill out that information so that I can clear that. And we're going to populate it. Okay, and when I tab past that, you'll notice that that warning error changes. All right, so I'm looking over my document here, and I know that my colleague Amy has the summary name, or has probably an idea of what she wants to leverage in this particular API. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit about this comments field, and you can tag specifically with an @ anybody who is in your workspace. And we're going to ask Amy, have a summary suggestion for this API. Okay, so now, whoops, too many buttons hitting there. So if we also have the ability to annotate, so you can annotate a specific comment, and you'll have a little balloon, and you can drag your balloon over to what you're referring to in the form view so that it's clear what you're asking for. And then when you're done, you can hit the arrow button or hit your enter button, and that will populate. And so if your colleague, if you have things integrated with like Slack or Jira or some of the other functionality, your colleagues will get a notification in there. If they're in the workspace, they'll get a notification via email, and they'll also be aware of it right away. And you'll notice how quick you can see that she just responded, and you'll note if your colleague is in the workspace at the same time. It's because you'll have like dots here with their initials on that. So she is suggesting that we use the Training Thursday, and we're going to go ahead and put that in there. And I'm going to go ahead and let her know that I have a thumbs up and I've got it. So we're good to go. And we are going to go ahead and take a look then at our overall projects here. Okay. So, and you'll notice that your shortcuts appear as you pop in and out of the different projects across the top. So it's a quick shortcut to get you back and forth where you need to be on some of this stuff. Okay, so I think we're good on our particular APIs and our documentation. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and publish. But before I publish, I'm going to show you the Files tab. And oops, we need to deselect that so that you can see the Files tab. And you'll notice here the documentation that I've created with the training tag, the models that are here, and the references that are here. Now, in your file, you can create a table of contents. So we're going to go up to the plus button and come down here to the table of contents button and create a table of contents. And you'll notice that Stoplight creates that table of contents for you. So from there, you have the ability to kind of edit and change that particular view, and you can preview it here to see what you're expecting. Now, this will be what your users will see in the workspace from a public view documentation, just so you're aware. All right, so we're going to go ahead and publish and commit, and then we will take a look at what our document looks like. You'll notice that when you're successful, you'll get a green box at the bottom, and sometimes you may get the share project screen that reappears again, and you can just X out of that. So we're going to go back to our workspace, and you'll notice that in the quick access toolbar here on the left-hand side, because I created the project, Stoplight pins that in my sidebar for me. So you can click on that, and then it'll generate the documentation. So here's the documentation that we created. You will also have the ability to see what public viewers would see with the APIs that are created and the Stoplight the automatically generated Stoplight documentation. And then again, here's this nice little copy if your colleagues want to be able to copy those features. All right, so if you've seen things here, features and functionality that you are interested in and you want to learn a little bit more, we recommend that you go to our documentation. Our documentation team has spent a great amount of time and effort in making the documentation user-friendly. So we recommend that you go there. So we're going to go ahead and go back to Amy to wrap up our session.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cheryl. As a reminder, we've posted a number of different helpful articles in the chat window. So I want to encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to copy those, please feel free to do that here before we end today. And as we wrap up, I'd like to quickly review the Stoplight subscription option plans for you. You can leverage a selection of software as a service subscription options fully hosted by Stoplight for your API design, mocking, documentation, and governance building blocks. With Stoplight's basic plan, you can begin working with interactive docs and mocking servers, and it allows you to collaborate with up to 3 users. Moving up to Stoplight's starter plan, your subscription includes 5 users who can collaborate on up to 10 projects, and it unlocks the approved email domain and custom workspace domain features within your workspace. You can also purchase additional user licenses as needed. By leveling up to Stoplight's professional subscription plan, your subscription includes 10 users on up to 100 projects, along with 20 teams, 50 guest users, and again, you can purchase additional user licenses as needed. With external guests, you have the ability to invite users who are external to your organization to your Stoplight project so they can view your internal API design specification and documentation articles from behind an authenticated session. The professional plan also unlocks additional single sign-on options, such as SAML and LDAP, additional Git provider options, such as GitHub Enterprise and Azure DevOps Server, and also custom domain features within your workspace, which will allow you to use your own host name to access your Stoplight hosted API designs and docs. And you will have access to the discussions feature to help build collaboration when designing your APIs. And lastly, with Stoplight's enterprise subscription plan, your subscription includes 25 users, unlimited projects, unlimited external guests, and unlimited teams. You also gain the ability to access volume license discounts when purchasing additional user licenses. You have additional invoicing flexibility and custom payment terms. And finally, you have enhanced onboarding and training engagements with our customer success team and enhanced priority for your support cases. As a reminder, all of the questions that were posted in the Q&A will be added to Discord in the Connect and Discuss forum with the tag of training. You'll be able to submit, or we'll post all of those questions and answers in there shortly. And I've just added, if you haven't visited our community page, I've just added a link in there so you can reference that if you would like to. And that wraps up our training session for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Mark your calendars for our next training Thursday, which will be May 11th. Our live trainings are scheduled for the second Thursday of each month. And be sure to check out our Learn with Stoplight webinars playlist, which has recordings of all of our past Stoplight training sessions. And these can be found in YouTube if you search for Learn with Stoplight webinars. You can also search for our how-to playlist, which will provide you with short trainings to learn about specific functionality. So we'll stay on for another minute just in case there's any more questions that come through. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on our next training session.